Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, September 18th at 7 p.m. and we are in regular session tonight. Before we begin, I would like to make a land acknowledgement that we're on land occupied for millennia by the Adena, Hopewell, Fort Ancient, and Shawnee people. Before we start the business session, we're going to have a public hearing, and this is part of the process when we amend our code, that we have a public hearing to receive comments from anybody about concerns about the particular zoning that we're recommending to be changed. In this case, what we're doing is working towards amending the sign regulations to include feather flags as temporary advertising signs. And you may have noticed around town that they're everywhere, as they are in many communities. And what we have suggested is to adding to the code that the maximum number of temporary signs shall not exceed 2 per property. For multiple businesses operating on one property, the maximum number of temporary signs shall be 1 per business. The maximum total signage area for all temporary signs shall not exceed 50 square feet. And so with that, I'll see if our Councilmember Grace, who is chair of our Planning and Development Committee, has any comments, and then we'll see if there are any comments from the audience.
Thank you, President Isley. I would, President Isley pretty much thoroughly explained the changes to the zoning code, but just for a little bit of additional information, I would say that these rules apply to advertising banners, posters, pennants, ribbons, streamers, strings of lights, or other similar devices. And the addition that we're reviewing this evening is to add specifically feather flags to that list of types of promotional materials that a business might use. And everything except the feather flags was already listed in our current zoning code.
Thank you. And do we have any comments from our audience members? Okay. If not, we'll consider the public hearing closed at 7:03 p.m. Thank you very much. I'm glad to have this opportunity in case there are people who are concerned about it.
Yeah.
Our next item of business is establishing a quorum, and we do have all members of council present tonight. And the next item is disposition of the minutes, and this is for the regular session held on September 5th. And if I could have a motion for approval of these minutes.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We now have communications. I have 2 items. One is that council members have received an application from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control. And this is for a business that is changing its name from Athens Pyramid LLC, and that's located at 5 Mill Street. And the new name will be Bob Athens LLC at 5 Mill Street. And we're not familiar with who Bob is, but someone asked, but we're not. And so this is before us, and if there would be any questions about it, so it looks to be a name change. And but if there would be any responses, the Division of Liquor Control would have to receive them from City Council by October 10th. The other communication that we received was a phone call that came into the City Council office on Friday, and this was from the Forest Supervisor, the Wayne Forest Supervisor, Lee Stewart, and I believe the mayor also received a call too, basically acknowledging the fact that City Council several weeks ago sent a letter in which they also suggested, our council members as a body, suggested changing the name of the Wayne National to the Buckeye, was it the Buckeye National Forest. They haven't reached a decision yet. He did comment that they had over 1,200 responses, and they've consulted with 40 tribes, and 12 tribes, Indian tribes, were actively participated in the process. And the Secretary's decision will be made, they hope, by November, and will be notified. So, Are there communications from other council members? Yes, Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Isley. Appreciate that update on the Wayne National Forest on the heels of the land acknowledgement that began this meeting, which is a change from when I began on council from a couple of years ago. So I really want to acknowledge the progress that we've made and to acknowledge that many of our community members are now observing Hispanic Heritage Month, which began September 15th and will extend through October 15th. I also want to provide council with an update and some specific feedback that council has received from the Racial Equity Coalition of Athens County, whom we recently engaged in some discussion around the recent recommitment to combating racial injustice that council made. We recently passed that resolution, and the Racial Equity Coalition of Athens County met on Friday and provided a few thoughts about the final resolution. The first was a question about the extent to which we can work alongside each other as communities, encouraging similar resolutions from local governments nearby, and also personal connections with other villages and cities that might consider other resolutions, an encouragement for council to serve as a resource and perhaps role model and source of encouragement for neighbors. The second was to encouragement to resume dialogue on affirming commitments to other equity and inclusion topics, and specifically asking what might the next steps be to pledging the council and administration support to other diverse groups, following up in particular on council's discussion of the importance of socioeconomic diversity in our region. Finally, an invitation for city officials to resume attendance at racial equity meetings, which was at its height in 2020, but has declined since. So I will be sending along invitations and opportunities. And finally, on that note, a collaboration organized by the Racial Equity Coalition and involving our city leadership is a community welcome event to be held in acknowledgement of many new community members who come to Athens and would like to be aware of the kinds of commitments to racial equity and other diversity and inclusion matters that we have. So this event will be on October 26th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Athens Middle School cafeteria, and is being organized by the Racial Equity Coalition of Athens County in collaboration with Athens City Schools, the Ohio University Division of Diversity and Inclusion, the City of Athens, the Athens Community Relations Commission, and the Athens County Foundation. So I will be following up with more information about that as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for all the information. Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to announce that this is Pollution Prevention Week. The City of Athens and Ohio University and the Athens Soil and Water Conservation District teams together to recognize this week specifically focused on stormwater and our stormwater discharge permit that the city and the university hold together to regulate the pollution that is entering into our Hocking River and local waterways. Today, the Athens Rethink Plastics group was at the Alumni Gate, and they will be at Baker Center on Thursday, along with the Athens Soil and Water Conservation District. Climate and sustainability ambassadors from Ohio University will be marking campus storm drains, as well as city storm drains this week. And you can join us on Wednesday at the Alumni Gate to see if you can tell the difference between Athens City tap water and bottled spring water at the annual water tap versus bottled water taste test. 12-1. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Wednesday.
Any other communications from other council members? If not, we'll move on to reports and communications from other elected officials. Law Director Eliason. Mayor Patterson.
Thank you, President Isley. Councilmember Crowell, I know which one is going to win. I'll tell you that right now. My bet is on the city water because it is awesome. Thank you, President Isley. I'm glad that you brought up the communication from the national forest that surrounds us and the name change. It was heartening to hear that it is going to be moving forward, but still has a process to go through in order to get there. I want to share with council just briefly, for some unknown reason, I've been visiting with a lot of citizens across the city of Athens and of late, and I want to share with council, I'm often hearing how much our citizens as I'm hearing it, appreciate what our police department does and the way they're handling things, the fire department and how responsive and well they're handling things when people are in crisis, our code office, and then the courtesy that they are experiencing when we have contractors in town, most recently with the 2023 street repaving project, with those that are those who are milling and repaving a lot of our city streets here in the city of Athens. So I just want to share that with council. It was certainly heartening for me to hear this often, and just want to share. The last thing I want to share with council is that I received this really interesting package of little notes from a faculty member at Ohio University that was running the Green Project Camp on campus by the Stacy Literacy Center at Ohio University. And this was for 7 to 12-year-olds. Most of the letters that I received, I think, were for 7-year-olds. And it all, Councilman Crowell, this will make you smile, it all had to do with what are ways in which the city can improve ourselves when it comes to helping the environment. And it was everything from appreciating and encouraging us to continue to adhere to the plastic, single-use plastic bag ordinance, but also I'm seeing a lot of broken glass on the ground. Can we inform people that glass is a recyclable material and not just throw bottles on the ground? So there's really some pretty cute stories in here, but it's great to see that, you know, kids as young as 7, that this is heavy on their minds. It's heavy on their minds that we need to do the right thing to continue to protect the planet, be a more sustainable environment, as well as decarbonize ourselves as a community. So, thank you, President Isley.
Thank you. We'll now move on to ordinances for third reading. The first one is 8223. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into the agreement establishing the Northeast Ohio Public Energy, NOPEC, the Public Energy Council, known as NOPEC, and a natural gas program agreement with NOPEC and related matters. And this is introduced by all members of council. By way of background, the NOPEC agreement, of which we were a part from the city, was through SOPEC previously, and now we are entering directly into the NOPEC agreement with the city. And so this is a slight change, but a pickup on the existing agreement that we have with this Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council. And if I could have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And is there any further discussion or comments? Councilmember Swank.
Just a quick question for Director Riggs, or Director Stone, I'm sorry. Assuming that we pass this and the mayor signs it, how soon will the citizens of Athens be able to take advantage of this good pricing?
I can answer this.
Okay.
Since I'm very familiar with this, the gas aggregation. It currently exists. So everyone who is underneath the NOPEC gas aggregation, they're already experiencing the savings through aggregated gas. So nothing will change when it comes to that. This is simply disentangling SOPEC being the pass-through of the rates that people are paying for the gas and then sending that on to NOPEC. And that was due to a partnership that was agreed upon back in 2017 when we entered into this gas aggregation.
So for those people who aren't current NOPEC customers, will they be receiving an opportunity through the mail or something to become a member?
I can certainly reach out to NOPEC and ask them to do a refresh. That's typically what they'll do, is do what's called a refresh and send out notice to the citizens of Athens to say, here's the rate for NOPEC gas aggregation, and encourage them to be a part of NOPEC, which is a simple thing to do. You know, typically it's an opt-out, because every citizen here in the city of Athens is eligible for because of our agreement, for the NOPEC gas aggregation. I'll talk to the administration of NOPEC and ask them to send out a refresh. I think that would be prudent anyway, because every year we see, for those who are living in off-campus student housing, you know, a lot of there is a number of units where the landlord is not paying those utilities. It is incumbent upon the renter to have electric, gas, so on and so forth. And so therefore, it would be a good idea to get a refresh out to all the accounts in the city of Athens, just to remind them that they're under the NOPEC gas segregation, and if they aren't, to enter into it.
Yeah, and the reason I asked the question, right now, their rates are 52.9 cents, and there's nothing out there less than that. I mean, this is really a good financial program for anybody in the city of Athens that wants to take advantage of it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, we have a motion and second for approval of 8223. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 8423 is an ordinance granting a special right-of-way use permit at 39 Hooper Street to Patrick and James Balding, owners, for continued use of the city right-of-way for an existing fence. And this is introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Nisley. I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance 8423.
Second.
Thank you, Member Ziff. And this is a pretty straightforward use of the right-of-way, and it is essentially a renewal because the building owners have had a fence in existence for more than 10 years at this location, and it was just time for them to reapply for the special right-of-way permit.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Are there any questions or comments from council, administration, other elected officials, or our audience members? Okay. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 8523 is an ordinance accepting a certificate of registration from Madison Energy Cooperative Association, Utility Pipeline Limited, for use of the city's right-of-way, introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Nisley. I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance 8523.
Second.
Thank you, Member Ziff. And this is somewhat similar, but it has distinct differences. It's a different action under Title 49, and that is that utility companies, public utility companies that are utilizing the right-of-way in the city of Athens are required to provide a certificate of registration. And just, this helps us with our record keeping, so we know which companies have which utilities in which locations. And this ordinance is part of the process through which council accepts the certificate that has been submitted.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and second. Are there any comments or questions from council members, administration, other elected officials, or our audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 8623 is an ordinance authorizing disposal of a police department vehicle no longer needed for a municipal purpose and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance 86-23.
Second.
The ordinance is exactly as you read the title. The vehicle in question is Athens Police Department 2017 Jeep used by code enforcement or traffic enforcement. We have the VIN and the asset numbers in our packet, so let me just read section 2. The above list of vehicle is hereby authorized for disposal by donation to other governmental agencies, auctions, sealed bids, trade-in, sell for scrap, or enterprise wholesale auctions or other enterprise outlets.
Okay, thank you. And we have a motion and second for this ordinance. Do we have any questions or comments from council members, administration, other elected officials, or our audience members? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 8723 is an ordinance amending the 2023 appropriation ordinance 15522 and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. I'd like to make a motion to adopt 87-23.
Second.
Thank you, Member Ziff. There are two items in this appropriation ordinance, and I'll go ahead and read through these. The 2023 appropriation ordinance, 155-22, is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums: $3,640 to the general fund, lands and buildings, for the 2023 NOPEC Energized Community Grant. We have used this grant in the past for some solar lighting on our city streets, and in this case, this amount will be used for a pocket park, a new pocket park in the city of Athens, near Meadow Lane, down on the east side of Athens. This appropriation also has $20,000 to the Water Fund Administration for payments to the LEAX Rural Water District under the Kershaw Green Agreement, and increasing the total appropriations by the same amounts. This payment is for the new housing development on 682, near the intersection of Union Street and 682. And as part of this development project, it was agreed to provide these payments to the LEAX Water District for those taps to be city taps. Thank you, President Isley.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion and second for approval of 8723. Any comments or questions from council members, administration, other elected officials, or our audience members? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ordinance is approved. We now have ordinances for second reading, and we have these three readings are required by law. So at the second time, there is usually a reading of the title and then stopping to see if there are any questions or comments, and then we move on to read the next title. So our ordinances for second reading, and you might notice that the title is slightly different. And so the title of this ordinance is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to execute a 25-year replacement easement with Ohio University for an existing water line. And if no comments or questions, we'll move on to 8823. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement with the LEAX Regional Water District for release of certain real estate parcels to the city for water service along Dairy Lane, and is introduced by Councilmember McCary. And if there are no questions or comments, I'll move on to the next one. And that is 8923, an ordinance declaring certain police department firearms no longer needed for a municipal purpose. This is introduced by Councilmember McCary. If no questions or comments, we'll move on to the next one, which is 9023. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an LPA federal local let project agreement with the State of Ohio Department of Transportation for sidewalk accessibility and traffic signal improvements in the uptown area. This is known as Project 329, and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Reisner. And if no comments or questions, our next one is 9123. An ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids and enter into contracts for construction and construction engineering services for the Uptown Improvements Project, number 329. Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Yes, ma'am. 3 weeks ago, when this was before committee, we were talking about this project, particularly the part on Washington Street and the eyesore that is presented by the overhead lines and street lights and all of that. Director Stone, if I recall, you were going to possibly look into what the price would be if we would get that, and you said, and we still have 2 more weeks, but you said you'd hope to get it before we got to third reading. Have you been able to get some kind of an estimate what that would add to the cost of this project?
Thank you, Member Swank. I appreciate your question. It's prescient given the correspondence that I've had with American Electric Power over the last several days about this particular issue. I think it's in the $400,000 range for that section right there to get those underground. I'd have to get back and get that exact number for you. One of my observations with American Electric Power is they don't want to do it. You know, I mean, that's the bottom line, is all of the situations where we ask them to go underground, you know, that, the utility, and, you know, I understand, you know, they're a large utility and everything's working fine as it is right now, up in the air, and, you know, us asking them to go and bury lines for aesthetic reasons in an area is not their highest priority. And so, you know, as we've corresponded with American Electric Power, and we've said, look, you know, we need you to go underground here, and we're willing to pay for the costs associated with going underground, but you need to give us the estimate for that. And so, you know, the customer service representative that we deal with regularly has indicated that she'll get the designers on their side moving, so that can happen in conjunction with the construction project that we're willing to do. So that's where we are on that.
Thank you, because when we talked about this 3 weeks ago, the figure that was bannered about was around $1 million, so that,
I think if we added both that section as well as State Street, I mean, the figure would probably be north of $1 million.
Okay.
But right now, we're focused on West Washington specifically because that particular area is one that I think it will be, you know, easy is relative, but that is a section that is much easier to do relative to the Washington Street section. If you look at the number of private parcels that are served by overhead service, that would then subsequently have to reinstall all of their electric service to receive service from underground. That's really the biggest barrier in switching from overhead to underground. Is not so much the utility going underground, although that is important, than finding space for the transformers to go, but then also telling individual property owners, you no longer can have your electric service the way you want it. Instead, you must pay to have that electric service come in underground and do it on our timeline. And that's what's hard about getting electric underground. Right now, that block, West Washington specifically, has electric service to go to the Frontier Building and electric service to go to People's Bank from transformers that are there. I think both of those will be relatively easy. In fact, I was looking at it today to figure how to get that service to change from overhead to underground. But you know, it remains to be seen that what I think is easy by walking by and looking at may be a little bit more difficult once they get into the design. But we're hopeful we can get that underground.
and don't get me wrong, $400,000 is a lot of money, but I went up there today, took pictures, which I was hoping to load, but I would invite members of council to go up there and stand in front of Artifacts or Casa and look across the street at Tony's and just look at what I'll call a conglomeration of wires and poles and stuff everywhere. And so maybe when we get back together in 2 weeks to vote on this, we might be able to consider at least looking at that.
Okay, thanks for the comments. Mayor Patterson?
President Nisley and Councilmember Swank, one of the things that I've been exploring is putting together a proposal for round 2 Appalachian Communities Grant funding to look at Carpenter Street, improvements on Carpenter Street, but also possibly managing the cost, or at least accounting for the cost of the underground for State Street between Court and Congress, for that utility. You know, I think Director Stone is actually, you know, a little on the light side. When I look at what it was going to cost the city to do 2 blocks on Stimson Avenue back in 2021 with the Stimson Avenue improvement, it was $1.5 million to get it underground, which, as Director Stone was saying, was the transformers and everything. You know, I think to do Washington, again, I'm not an engineer, he is, but you know, you look at as you've seen the hanging spaghetti noodles everywhere up there, and it's probably closer to $2 million to get that, you know, and including Carpenter Street, if we were to be able to be successful in going after an ACG grant to cover something like that. So there is an opportunity. It's all about timing, though, to make sure we can do it. But I'm going to give it a shot and see if we can get in a further uptown improvement project using the Appalachian Communities Grant.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Graves?
I just wondered, Mr. Mayor, with that grant, would it be possible for some of the grant dollars to be used to offset the private property owner's expense for moving? If part of the issue is, you know, on West Washington is easier, relatively speaking, than West State due to the fact that there are only 2 property owners on that block of West Washington compared to the many on West State. that, I don't know if that's allowable under the, but if so, I think that might be something that would help the businesses and the property owners there to be more enthusiastic about the project, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we can certainly look into, you know, trust me, the guidelines for the ACG grants, it's basically an aircraft that's being built as it's flown. They're constantly changing. We did get some firm guidance more recently as to what is allowable and what isn't allowable, but I can certainly ask the people that are working on it to find out for us whether that's a permissible expense.
Thank you.
Great. All right, thank you for the comments. We'll move on to 9223. This is an ordinance amending the 2023 appropriation ordinance 15522. And if there are no comments or questions, we'll now move on to ordinances for first reading. 9323 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 9, General Regulations, Chapter 9.05, Fire Control, Petroleum Liquids, Section 9.05.99, Penalties, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Nisley. We discussed this in committee with the presidents of the fire chief recently and are really just attempting to update the fines associated with fire violations to reduce the number of violations that occur. So in the spirit of safety, I would encourage the adoption. I'm going to read Section B. Any person who shall violate Section 9.05.08 of Athens City Code on a first offense shall be deemed guilty of a minor misdemeanor and fined not more than $150. A second offense within a 2-year period shall be deemed a misdemeanor of the 4th degree, punishable by not more than 30 days in jail and a fine of not more than $250. A third offense with a 2-year period shall be deemed a misdemeanor of the 3rd degree, punishable by not more than 60 days in jail and a fine of not more than $500. And a fourth offense within a 2-year period shall be deemed a misdemeanor of the 2nd degree, punishable by not more than 90 days in jail and a fine of not more than $750. Each time a violation occurs shall constitute a separate and complete offense. So again, these are increases in penalties for fire violations.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember McCary. Do we have any questions or comments? Councilmember Swank?
Member McCary, are these consistent with state penalties for the same infractions?
Just based on comments from Fire Chief Reisner, these are within the state's guidelines, but not at the maximum, is my understanding.
Councilmember Grace? Yes.
I just wanted to, because it was discussed in committee and the question was asked of whether or not these fine amounts are the maximum for these level of offenses, and I believe that they are.
Oh, they are? Okay.
Yes,
they are.
Yeah,
Thank you.
this is under ORC. That is the maximum that they can be for those level of offenses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments? All right, if none, we'll move on to 9423. This is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a memorandum of understanding and addendum with the Ohio Organized Crime Investigations Commission Task Force number 22-09, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Nisley. As discussed recently in committee, it's not at all unusual for our law enforcement to establish mutual aid agreements, and this task force is indeed an opportunity to collaborate to investigate crimes including murder, corrupt activity, money laundering, trafficking in drugs, possession of drugs, corrupting another with drugs, and so on and so forth. And this would be inclusive of counties of Athens, Morgan, Noble, Monroe, Meigs, and Washington. I believe that's most of the pertinent information. I'll read from Section 1 that the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a memorandum of understanding and addendum with the Ohio Organized Crime Investigations Commission Task Force 22-09, a copy of which is attached here to and incorporated herein by reference.
Any questions or comments? If none, we'll move on to 9523. This is an ordinance amending the 2023 appropriation ordinance 15522 and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. There are a number of appropriations in this ordinance, and I'll go ahead and read and explain these as discussed at committee. We have $8,400 to the general fund for the Ohio Governor's Imagination Library. This is a program that provides books to children between the ages of 0 and 5, I believe, Mr. Swake, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's a wonderful program. We did discuss at committee the possibility of funding this for several years, but the amount, depending on the number of children who are enrolled in the program, changes year to year. And quite frankly, I enjoy our now annual visits by Director Tepe to hear about how successful this program is and to hear a little bit about the Athens Public Library. So we do have that $8,400 appropriation on this ordinance. We have $2,500 to the cemetery fund to replace a damaged granite bench. We have $4,298.91, and this is to fund our city skate park repairs. We discussed this many months ago at committee, but the check just came in. And so the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Department is requesting this appropriation as soon as possible so that they can work on the skate park. And then we have a $200,000 appropriation to the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Fund 273. This is for a transfer. And of course, we'll be increasing all the total appropriations by these same amounts. I'll go ahead and read section 2 here. The 2023 appropriation ordinance is amended by decreasing Stormwater Environmental Control Fund, transaction code 500, by $500, and increasing the Stormwater Environmental Coordinator Fund, transaction code 200 and 300 by that same amount. So this is simply transferring $500 from the capital line in that fund to the supplies line so that safety supplies can be purchased. And finally, in section 3, the auditor is hereby authorized to make the following interfund transfer. This is that amount of $200,000 from the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Fund 273 to the Recreation Fund 270. Thank you, President Isley.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Eisner.
Will the $2,500 to the cemetery fund lay this issue to rest?
People are dying to find out.
Oh, boy.
Can we fire both of you now?
Bob.
Vote in November.
We'll move on if there are no other questions or comments. Announcements and other business. We will be having a committee meeting next Monday night. And the other announcement that we have right now, well, I will check to see if council members have any other announcements. Yes, Councilmember Ziff.
Thank you, President Isley. Yeah, it goes well with what Councilmember Crowell was just talking about with the appropriation for Skate Jam that will be happening this Saturday from noon until 9 at the Athens Skate Park. If you want to come watch some awesome people do some awesome and slightly terrifying things and help support a good cause, get some food, have a beverage, you can watch me put my paramedic hat on and be terrified as skaters do things that skaters do. Oh, God. But come on out. It's a great time.
Any other
all I got.
announcements? Okay. And for that committee meeting next week, if committee chairs have any agenda items, if they could have them to our clerk of council by Wednesday, that would be a help. Thank you. The other item that we have is an appointment or reappointment to the Affordable Housing Commission. And I believe Councilmember Grace has some information for us.
Yes, thank you, President Isley. I actually have two individuals who have volunteered to serve on the Affordable Housing Commission. And the first one is Karen Dawn, and she is a resident of the Near North Side neighborhood and has previously served the city in other commissions and asked if there was an opportunity to be involved. And to start with, she is going to finish an unexpired term. So her appointment will be for 1 year to finish the term of an individual who moved out of town. And the second individual is Kimberly Francis, and she is an attorney here in Athens and works with a lot of individuals who struggle to find housing that meets their needs and is within their budget. So she is very interested in working with the Affordable Housing Commission, and so I would like to make a motion that we accept their wonderful offers of service and appoint them to the Affordable Housing Commission.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for the appointment of Karen Don and Kimberly Francis. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, and thank them for their work. Last item, before we make a motion to go into executive session, is an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services not covered on our agenda. So anyone in the audience who is wanting to make a statement for items that were not on the agenda tonight, they have up to 3 minutes. And if there's no one, then we'll move on to our next item. And what we will be doing is we're going to be taking a motion to go into executive session. And once we do that, we will pause, and I know that there are students here that are wanting to talk to elected officials and other administration, so we will allow you 15 minutes from the time that we make that motion to do that. Once we go into executive session, we do close the doors. When we come out of executive session, if anybody has any remaining unanswered questions or wants to come back in, we do open the doors to make the final motion to adjourn the meeting. So if I could have a motion for council members entering into executive session. Yes, Councilmember Ziff.
Sure, thank you, President. I'd like to move that we enter into executive session with all members of council present, as well as the Service Safety Director, Mayor, and Law Director, for the purpose of discussing what we're discussing. Yeah.
You have to name
What is
it.
the collective bargaining and sale of municipal property?
Thank you.
There it is.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, and we do a roll call vote for this. So Councilmember Spielness?
Aye.
Councilmember Reisner?
Aye.
Crowell?
Aye.
Swank?
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Zip?
Aye.
McCary?
Aye.
Okay. All right, it is 7:43, so you've got 15 minutes, so you've got to 7:58, so let's say 8 o'clock, to be able to ask questions of any of the council members here. Thank you.